Being a 16-year-old boy in a small town in America doesn't sound fun, and it's not. Although, for my parents, this town was a dream come true. We are financially stable thanks to the jobs they love. Even though this town is far from being a metropolis, it somehow manages to provide for everyone. The neighborhood we live in is also a beautiful place full of happy people. The neighbors are kind and caring. People go to the store with a smile on their faces while greeting each other on their way. We all seem to love our little heaven. I don't know exactly when my parents moved in, but at least I'm sure I was born here. My father has rarely said anything about the move-in, so the only source of information was my mother. That day, it was the first time your dad and I felt so loved, she used to say. Though, no matter how hard I tried, I was never able to get the answers I had desperately needed. Are the earplugs uncomfortable? They would always assume. That was never the issue. The curiosity was uncomfortable and sometimes even unbearable. At the beginning, I said I was happy, which is true. But besides love, this town fills my heart with fear too. Here, no one's life is perfect. Or should I say, night. We always cover our ears at 2:33 a.m. to not hear the sound coming from the manhole on the street. It only lasts a minute. That's what my mother told me, at least. I'd never questioned it because she said not wearing earplugs could result in hearing loss. The earplugs we use are made of high-quality reusable wax, so we don't hear anything. It's easy to manipulate a child, and since I didn't want to be deafened, I listened. I've been wearing soundproof earplugs every night for 11 years. As I said earlier, sometimes the curiosity was unbearable. I wanted to hear whatever sounds were coming from the manhole, or at least see what was making them. That's why one night, with my earplugs in, I peeked out the window at exactly 2:33 a.m. Nothing. There was nothing on the street. I was about to go back to sleep when I saw something from the corner of my eye. My heart was racing as I was looking at the manhole lid, jumping up and down. I immediately closed the blinds and stared at them for the next few seconds. Frozen. I remember not being able to fall asleep that night. All I was thinking about was the manhole. Is there a monster living in the sewers? Eventually, tiredness took over my fear and I fell asleep. The next day, I decided to confront my parents about the sound and the rule. I don't know what I expected, but I do know what I got. Blank stares. That's all. Not a sentence. Not a word. For God's sakes, just yell at me for peeking out the window. Since that day, months have passed. Years. I still wear earplugs every night. My parents have a different tactic though. They have an alarm set because they stay awake until 3 a.m. I sometimes don't go to sleep either. So every time I hear Felicita from my parents' bedroom, I knew it was time for the sounds and it always sent shivers down my spine. I usually have trouble falling asleep because of it. One night, I stayed up until 2:20 a.m. I got lost in the music. After glancing at my watch, I went downstairs for a glass of water.
Casey, and Brooklyn.
I was looking out the window while I was waiting for the glass to fill.
And I really look forward to making more content for everyone.
Nothing on the street. Once I turned off the faucet, complete silence started ringing in my ears. The feeling was strange. Silence. So quiet, yet so loud. For a moment, I thought I was wearing earplugs. Even though the silence was absolute, I wasn't the only one in the room. I screamed when I saw somebody sitting at the dining table. It took me some time to realize that the scary silhouette was my father. "Dad?" I stuttered. He didn't turn around. He didn't even acknowledge my existence. "What are you doing here? And where are your earplugs? It's almost 2:33 a.m. I asked, confused. "Sit down," he calmly said. I didn't want to be lectured about staying up late, so I ignored his request. My father let out a sigh and said again, "Sit down." Getting on his bad side was not on my wish list, so this time I listened. "What time is it?" he asked after I took a seat. "Dad, it's almost 2:33 a.m. What are you doing?" I asked again, nervously. He didn't answer. Instead, he got up and grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I can't drink that," I said. "Sure you can," he calmly replied. After pouring the Tempranillo wine, he said, "We're waiting." I didn't understand at first. For what? I rushed to ask. He ignored the question again and took the first sip of his wine. That's when I realized. No, we're not doing that. Are you out of your mind?" I yelled. "Have you ever wondered what ruins your life?" he said out of nowhere. I had to think about that sentence for a moment. "Are you truly happy, John?" he continued. This time, I was the one who wasn't answering. I didn't know what to say. The series of unexpected questions left me stunned. I looked at the clock hanging on the wall. "Dad, the sounds are about to start," I finally said, timidly. "Felicita, internese per mano andro lanto la visita." The alarm went off too, scaring the life out of me. That was the last warning before the storm. My father took another sip of his wine. "Son, there are no sounds," he said. I refused to believe that. I was running out of time, so I jumped out of my chair and ran upstairs as fast as I possibly could. I managed to put in the earplugs before 2:33 a.m. I was just standing in the middle of the room, waiting for the sounds to end. The strange thing is, I don't remember falling asleep. It felt as if the whole night had gotten blown away by the wind. In the morning, I looked for my dad downstairs. I don't know why I expected him to still be there. Someone else was sitting at the table though. It was my mom. She was in tears. "What happened?" I asked, worried. "John, sit down." The same place felt so different. The wine bottle on the table was still there, and yet everything seemed new. "Your father lost his job yesterday." I was stunned. I don't know where he is. He's probably trying to get his job back, but I doubt he will succeed, she said, and started drinking straight from the bottle. I could feel my face turn red. My palms were sweating as I started breathing rapidly. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked. I looked at her. I started to cry. That's when I realized he wasn't trying to get his job back. He tried to get his life back. It's been 3 months since I lost my father. It's tragic, but above all, It left a huge hole in me. Even though nothing has directly told me, I can feel that he's down there, somewhere. Down in the sewers, along with everyone curious. I loved my father, and it took him. Is it a monster? A ghost? A black hole? I'm not sure. All I know is I'll keep wearing my earplugs to not find out. At the end of the day, we're the ones who, without permission, settle down in someone's world. It doesn't matter if it's under the ground, it still belongs to someone, or something. And if covering our ears is the only rule we have to follow to have access to its magic, I'll make sure to not break it. Hey, the blonde lady shouted. Hey, why are you avoiding me? She must have mistaken me for someone else. Someone she was pissed at. That was for sure. Her hair was frazzled, and she was running at me in heels. I felt bad for her. I think you got the wrong guy. She slapped my pitying smile right off my face. 10 years. She snarled like a wild animal. 10 years and that's all you gotta say? She was shoving me, scratching at my face with her long red nails. I loved you, Aiden. We had something special. She seemed to know my name, but I'd never seen this woman before in my life. Get off, I yelled. I didn't want to hurt her, but I didn't want my eyes clawed out either. The doors of a metro elevator were closing up ahead. I shoved my attacker off and slipped inside at the last second. The other passengers stared at me judgmentally while she pounded on the tiny door. But I held the door closed button until we started moving up. I caught glimpses of the crazy blonde running up the escalators, but she'd never make it in time. I was leaving her behind. I talked it over with my girlfriend that evening. Was it possible that I had a stalker? One who'd been watching me for a long time? 10 years? But who was only confronting me just now? It sounded too crazy to believe. My girlfriend Lauren didn't seem too bothered, probably because she hadn't been there. If she'd seen the crazy look in that woman's eyes, well, now you know what she looks like, right? Lauren shrugged, twisting her black hair around her fingers, like she always did when she was bored. So you can just avoid her if you see her again. I kept my eyes peeled during my morning commute. Sure enough, there she was, her golden hair swinging from side to side as she searched the crowd for someone, for me. Our eyes met. She spotted me. The crazy woman suddenly started shoving her way through the crowd. Aiden! She shrieked my name again and again, making another scene. Aiden, you can't run away again. Aiden, you've gotta talk to me. Aiden. The flow of the crowd was against her though, and I was able to slip back up the stairs. My heart hammered in my chest. What if she had a weapon? I took a different way to work for a few days, but the metro was so much faster than the bus, and I felt stupid, letting some psychotic stranger push me around. I let out a sigh of relief when I sat down in my usual seat on the metro 3 days later. The blonde was nowhere to be seen. Maybe humans have a sixth sense that lets us know when we're being watched, or maybe my nerves were just on edge already. But by Friday, I was sure that someone was following me. It was dark and rainy when I left work. Beneath their black coats and umbrellas, the faces all looked the same. Who could it be? I tried the old spy movie trick of walking in a complete circle around a block, but I didn't like where I ended up. In a narrow street with hardly any light and no people. except for one figure that paused, uncertain, at the entrance of the alley. For a moment, they just stood there, unmoving, but they walked on. I caught a glimpse of pinned-up blonde hair beneath a beret. What if I followed her instead? This was getting silly, but I had to know. With a sinking feeling, I recognized the neighborhood she led me to. She was leading me right back to the apartment I shared with Lauren. Right back home. The psycho knew where I lived. What happened next was confusing, to say the least. The blonde took out a letter and slipped it under the building door. She hardly turned the corner when I saw Lauren through the glass door. My girlfriend tore the blonde's letter into tiny pieces, then buried it in the trash. What was going on here? Lauren hadn't seen me, I was sure of that. But later, when we talked about our day over dinner, she said nothing about the mysterious letter. And yet, I was the one who felt like I was hiding something from her when I fished around in the garbage the next morning, hunting for pieces of my stalker's letter. Juice stains and coffee grounds had made most of it illegible, but one phrase stood out. In fact, it was repeated several times. Not what she seems. Later that night in bed, I brushed Lauren's black hair away from her bare back. My stalker was probably referring to her, but what could Lauren possibly have to hide? We'd been together since. That was odd. I couldn't remember. Since before my new job and the new apartment. It must have been before I bought my phone and laptop too, since I didn't have pictures with any of my previous partners on either. I scrolled through the old photos mindlessly, unable to fall asleep. Something was bothering me, but I wasn't sure what. I let out a nostalgic sigh. It seemed like so long since Lauren and I had gone out and done any of the things in the pictures. I resolved to show a coworker a photo of Lauren and I at a bar with friends and asked if she was not what she seems, the same as they remembered. Whoa, man. My coworker Raj nearly soaked me with his coffee. Who's the blonde? What? I checked the image again. My Lauren with the emerald eyes and raven black hair. You know, Raj winked. That freckled blonde, you've got your arm around there. Who is she? Raj? I asked weakly. Can you describe this girl you see? Raj described a girl I knew, so did the rest of my coworkers. They described the girl who attacked me in the metro, the girl who followed me home. Try as I might, I couldn't make myself see what the others did. No matter how much I squinted, I only saw my vision of Lauren, a slender, black-haired woman with high cheekbones and piercing green eyes. She had all the features I was most attracted to, and I was so lucky to have. Wait, wasn't it a little too convenient that my girlfriend had every feature that I liked? I asked Raj to come back to my apartment. I told him that I needed help moving some furniture, but the truth was that I just wanted to know what he saw when he looked at Lauren. What everyone saw, except for me. Sure, man. Raj sounded surprised. You went out with us so much when you started here last month, but lately you've been hibernating. I want to see what you've got at the new place that's keeping you at home. It's true, I thought. A new job, new phone, new apartment. Over the course of the last 2 months, it was like I had become a different person. And when I tried to remember who I'd been before, the memories were fuzzy at best. My stomach lurched as I realized that I couldn't even remember my last address. On the bus ride toward home, I wasn't taking any chances. I smiled and nodded along to Raj's one-sided conversation about his dating app, misadventures. But inside, I was struggling to remember who I was, to remember what made me, well, me. Childhood was no problem. Adolescence, no worries. That closet full of skeletons was more than vivid enough to make me cringe. It was only more recently that things became hazy. Raj was still rattling on, although the topic had changed to the awful layout of apartments in our city. We stepped inside, kicked off our shoes, and headed down the narrow hallway to the living room. Like I was saying, it's almost impossible to find a place with a Belka. Ah! Raj made a guttural sound of terror and pressed his back against the wall. I couldn't see what he was so freaked out about. It was just Lauren, reading a book on the sofa. Honey, Lauren sighed. I thought I told you I don't like having guests at home. It was true. I remembered. Lauren had mentioned that. But why was she suddenly standing right beside me? How had she gotten so close to Raj in a split second? Why were his eyes so white and wide when he looked at her? When you make a mistake like this, Lauren went on, touching Raj's neck with a pale, slender hand. There are bad consequences for everyone. It was the strangest thing. It almost looked like Lauren's hand was slipping inside of Raj's neck, beneath the skin, to wrap around his windpipe. And then suddenly, just for a flash, it wasn't a hand at all, but some other appendage. The kind of thing I'd never seen in nature on Earth. And the thing it was attached to, the thing where Lauren stood. I felt dizzy. I told Lauren, of course, Lauren, but what had I just seen standing there? That I needed to go sit down. I think she nodded, and I sat down here, in the dim twilight of the bedroom, to write out these confusing thoughts. Just trying to think about what might be happening to make my head hurt. Trying to remember is like fainting. I need to lie down. It's incredible reading through all this. Where could I have gotten such crazy ideas? As long as I keep that blonde lady away, I'm sure everything will be fine. I need to go see how Lauren's doing. She's cooking some meat downstairs that smells delicious. You're new, right? Well, we're glad to have ya. Have you tried the fries yet? It was a question everyone had been asking me since I started working at the facility. I wasn't enthusiastic about eating lunch there, for a number of reasons. Firstly, my work. I cut up fish corpses for science. You can get used to the smell, but you never really get it out of your nose. Secondly, cafeterias attached to laboratories, like this one was, had always grossed me out. In theory, I know that the food stays separate from our preserved canisters of deep-sea creatures, but in practice, I can't stop imagining slimy black eels in the gallon jugs of ketchup and dead anglerfish floating in the soda machine. Ridiculous. I know. Even hospitals full of infectious disease have their own cafeterias, right? But even after a week of working at the facility, I still haven't set foot in the dining hall. Social pressure is hell of a drug. I didn't want to be known as the weird new guy who ate his sandwich outside with the seagulls every afternoon. Besides, the whole lab went to the cafeteria. If I didn't join, I'd never get to know any of my coworkers. And so I found myself washing my hands twice, sighing, trying to make my reflection in the staff bathroom mirror look less paranoid and strange. I didn't even have to eat anything. I told myself I could just sip a drink and socialize. With a final deep breath, I left the restroom and pushed open the door to the laboratory dining hall. It seemed clean at least, and I liked that. It didn't have that harsh chemical smell so common in facilities like ours, but the stainless steel surfaces practically sparkled. I'd underestimated the number of researchers at the facility. Workers with rubber gloves and hairnets scurried between the huge tables, carrying trays of food. Instead of slop I remembered from high school, plates were piled high with fresh and colorful foods. Today's menu was tandoori chicken with roast vegetables, or vegetarian lasagna with chopped greens. Both meals included fries and a drink. I stuck to my plan of just grabbing a coffee, but I tried to sneak a peek into the prep area too. A white-haired chef planted herself right between me and the kitchen, so squarely that I wondered if she was blocking my view on purpose. And was that suspicion in her eyes? I told myself I was just being paranoid. I should just focus on my coffee. As I poured it though, I yelped and nearly scalded myself. Something was swimming in the pot. It flicked its black fin tail and vanished into the brown murkiness. Or did it? I looked again, swirled the pot, swished the coffee left and right. Nothing. A bald guy from finance, Chris or Chuck or something, cleared his throat behind me, lifting an empty mug. I filled it and left the pot empty, with no nameless creature flopping around inside. I had to make myself get over this. On impulse, I grabbed a tray of chicken and vegetables. At the end of the line, a server stopped me. I reached for my credit card. "No, honey, it's free if you work here." She looked me over. "I seen you around, but you ain't got any fries. Them's the best part." I looked around at all the signs promoting golden piles of fries. "I'm just not that hungry, I guess." "Suit yourself." She rolled her eyes and waved me on. It was weird how much the cafeteria seemed to be pushing them. Maybe they were the cheapest thing to make. Maybe management put them up to it. But fried food upset my stomach, and you couldn't always tell what it had been before. I thought of the thing in the coffee pot and shuddered. My coworkers practically cheered when they saw me. "We thought you'd never make it." Dante, my boss, seemed to be in a rare good mood. He gave my shoulder a squeeze. "Welcome to the lunch crew." I saw a lot of familiar faces over the heaping plates of fries. The positive energy was contagious. I walked into the lunchroom wondering if I could make one friend at my new job. I left it feeling like I made several. The truth was that moving to a new city and starting this new job at the facility was stressing me out more than I was willing to admit. Even if I was finally working in the field I've been fascinated by since I saw Blue Planet as a kid. Around the lunch table though, I felt like maybe this could be my place. I was still stressed, but I didn't feel so alone. At least, until I fell asleep earlier that evening. The thing is, you're always alone in your nightmares. In this one, I was alone in the vast stainless steel cafeteria, wearing the white uniform, gloves, and hairnet of the lunchroom staff. Something was dripping in the kitchen. I had to stop the leak, but where was everyone? Something scuffled behind me, but when I turned, the tables waited empty and still, almost like they were willing me forward. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. Drip, drip. I passed by the drink machines and behind the buffet. I didn't recognize a lot of the machinery in the kitchen, especially the 3 huge steel cylinders on the wall. The lid was removed from one. Something leaked from its pipes. Drip, drip. Soon I'd be close enough to know what was in the vast, the source of the dripping. I leaned over the rim. I woke up screaming. I had to get over this ridiculous phobia. My whole new life was at stake. The next day at lunch, I added a heap of fries beside my hamburger. "Hunter," Dante shouted over the dinner table. "You've been working with the new samples, right?" "I am," I replied, "and this organism is different from other deep-sea life in a lot of ways." I was thrilled to be talking about my work, so much so that I forgot to eat. My coworkers ran off to a meeting, leaving with my plate of, now cold, hamburger and fries. I reached for the burger. The fries started squirming like tentacles, inky, black, and slimy. The meat of my burger flopped like a reanimated tissue sample. One of the gray bits of skin I examined beneath my microscope. I pushed myself away from the table with a scream. My food went flying across the floor. "Everything alright?" The white-haired chef bent down beside me. I mumbled an apology and scurried out of the cafeteria. That night, I dreamed I was swimming in a lightless metal tank, so cramped it was suffocating. In the morning, my sheets were soaked with what I hope was sweat. I felt tired, feverish. I struggled to concentrate at my work. When was the last time I'd eaten? More importantly, where were the rest of my researchers in my lab? Around noon, Dante stuck his head in the lab door. "Hey Hunter, wanna come for lunch?" I thought of fish entrails and spaghetti-thin worms writhing beneath the sea floor. I had to bring a hand to my mouth to hold in the vomit. "Are you feeling alright?" I kept my teeth gritted and mumbled an excuse. When he finally left, I let fly into the trash can. I found myself relieved that nothing was staring back at me from the chunky yellow mess I'd made. I went home early that day and spent 2 more days in bed with fever and delirious dreams. But my experiments were time sensitive. I had to get back to the facility. Instead of the lab, however, I found myself hurrying to the cafeteria. I still couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten, but I had to know what was in those meals. If I could just find out, it would all make sense. I was sure of it. Ignoring the shouts and warnings of the staff, I pushed my way through the big metal vats in the kitchen. The white-haired chef charged me, but she was too late. I was already lifting the lid. What I saw inside defied all description. Vampire squid, lampreys, and dissected anglerfish were nothing compared to it. All I could do was stare in horror until I was dragged away. Or so I thought. Later, when the security guard reviewed the camera footage with me, the vat was filled with perfectly ordinary frying oil. I needed to explain my actions, he said. I'd upset a lot of people. I didn't have to worry about excuses, however, because a knock at the door called the guard away, leaving me with all the still image of myself on the screen, frozen while I screamed at a vat of oil. The guard stayed gone for a while. I slipped out of the chair and pressed my ear to the door to listen in on the conversation outside. Almost like a kind of deep-sea rabies. Brought in by the new specimen. now believed transmittable to humans, results in a kind of dread of food, a psychological inability to eat. Subject will probably enter a starvation-induced coma, but will suffer horribly over the feeding tube. I think they're talking about me. Please. I don't want anything pumped into my throat. I don't want to be fed from that horrible creature. Please. Some people have normal jobs, Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week, health benefits, bonuses each year, retirement funds. Well, not me. I don't have a normal job. It's not easy doing what I do, but it pays the bills since I can't get a regular job due to my criminal record. I'm a janitor that works for the dark web, and I clean up murder rooms once the buyers are done torturing and killing the victims they paid for. I've been doing it for the past 3 years. Every time someone needs help cleaning up the bloody mess they made, I go in and clean up. I make sure there is not a single drop of blood in the room and dispose of the leftover body parts any way I could. No evidence remaining. No questions asked. In fact, I can never ask any questions. These people cannot be messed with. I just get paid to do my job and go home like nothing. It's a sick job, but they would pay me very good. But all that would change one night when I started to finally question my morality. It was one night when they called me to do a job. It's always at the same location, which is 40 miles from where I live in a rundown warehouse. I was called to clean up a room, which really was no problem at all. But I noticed, or barely caught on to something I never thought twice about. As I was cleaning the room that was covered in blood, I saw a small picture on the floor. I picked it up, and it was a picture of a little girl, probably around 14 years old. This made me think right away that this was probably the victim whose blood I was cleaning up just now. It gave me an uneasy feeling inside, and for the first time, kind of disturbed me just for the fact that these people are now using kids as their victims. But again, this was a job where no questions are asked. I put the picture in my pants pocket and continued cleaning. Once I was done, I packed up my things and quickly got out of the warehouse. I went inside my car and instantly, I got a call. It was them. They always call private. I answered and they asked me if I was done cleaning up. I told them yes and that I just got into my car. They then told me that they left the money inside my glove compartment while I was inside cleaning, and they'll probably have another job for me in the next 2 days since they have a customer who's already waiting. I knew I shouldn't have done this, but I decided to ask how old was she. Referring to the victim, they hung up the call. I'm sure they were pissed just with me asking. I didn't know if I should continue doing these type of jobs anymore, but I didn't know how I would get out of this without some possible threat to my life. I got the picture of the little girl and put it resting on the passenger side. I went home that night, contemplating everything. It was the next day around 9 o'clock at night when I got a private call. I knew it was them and I was tempted not to answer, but I did anyway. They gave me the same location again and to be there at 4 a.m. This time, no questions asked. Juan Miguel Santos of 3905 North 16th Street. The call hung up. This was a clear threat. Just do my job and get out of there. I would need to leave town the next morning and disappear after this. I arrived at the location and saw there was an old Grand Marquis parked outside. Usually there shouldn't be any cars but mine at the location, and got worried that maybe these people are keeping a close eye on me. I stepped outside my car and walked slowly inside. feeling more and more paranoid with each step I took. The hallways were darker than before, and I saw light coming from the room I was supposed to go in. I entered inside and my eyes couldn't believe what they had just seen. There was a girl in the middle of the room, tied up and gagged to a chair. Alive. The job wasn't done yet, but then I saw a body of a man laying right on the floor next to the girl. That looked to be around 16 years old. The girl began to scream at me, and I started to freak out even more. I ran to the man on the floor and checked his pulse. He was gone. This was the man that was going to kill this girl, since I saw a scalpel on his right hand. I walked myself out into the hallway and immediately got a call. Private. It was them. Is everything okay? They knew something was up. They also had cameras in the hallways, but not in the rooms. They must have seen I was nervous. Yes, everything's okay. Finish the job and get out. We'll leave the money in your car. They hung up, but I knew they knew something was wrong. I went back inside the room and the girl was yelling at me to help her with the gag in her mouth. I didn't know what to do. I needed to dispose of her body, but that meant I needed to kill her first. I looked around inside the man's bag and he had several weapons and tools inside, presumably to use to torture the girl. I pulled out a power drill and turned it on. The girl started to scream even more, telling me to stop. She was crying her eyes out. I aimed the power drill at her face, and more tears started to run down her face. I put the power drill down. I couldn't do it. I took off her gag and asked what had happened. She told me that the man fell on the floor and seemed like he had a heart attack. You know that I can't let you out of here. These are dangerous people, and there are cameras everywhere inside this building. We both looked around the room. What about him? Asked the girl. I looked at the man and saw he had a hoodie. I took it off and gave it to the girl. Put this on and cover yourself and run as far as you can away from here. I'm scared. What if they find me? The girl said. I looked inside the man's pockets and found some car keys. They must have been for the car that was parked outside. Here, take these keys. I think the car that's parked outside belongs to him. Whatever you do not go to the police. They will find you and they will kill you. Just go as far away from here as possible. Before she left, I asked her for her name and she said it was Crystal, and that she was 17 years old. I was scared for her. I knew they might have even been outside waiting for me to finish. Before she stepped outside, I looked around the lot to see if it was clear for her to go. There were only but 2 cars outside, and she quickly ran to the Grand Marquis. She said thank you and took off. I went back inside and quickly got my things. My phone started to ring. It was them. I ignored it and quickly ran to my vehicle. As soon as I was about to take off, a car was approaching from behind me. The car parked right behind me and 2 men in masks stepped out. Not only that, but they opened the backseat of the car and took out Crystal. They caught her. They knew everything we had done. I should have taken off. One of the men took out a gun and pointed at me to step outside my vehicle. I stepped out and they wanted for me to go inside. They took me and Crystal into the room with the client's dead body. I knew what they were going to do to us. Crystal couldn't stop whining and moping. This is what happens when you try to be a hero. I needed to do something before we would be dead bodies right next to the one that's already on the floor. I saw that Crystal was right beside the switches to the lights. I looked at her and signaled with my eyes to the switches to turn them off. The moment Crystal turned off the lights, I ran towards one of the masked men. Gunshots fired as the men were yelling to turn on the lights. I grabbed the power drill that was on the floor and drilled it right into the man's chest. I stuck the drill all the way in and didn't stop till I heard the man gurgling, choking from his own blood. I got off him and heard Crystal breathing hard and yelling. I turned on the lights and witnessed Crystal stabbing the other masked man repeatedly with a scalpel in the face. Half of his mask was gone from the punctures. I got Crystal and told her to stop. She was frightened, terrified. She hugged me tight and began to cry. Both of us had made it out alive this time. We walked over to my car and took off, both of us covered in blood. The sun was coming out because it was already 6:30 in the morning. We both needed to change our identities, and I knew a guy who could do it that I met in jail, and drove over to his place right away. Sometimes I do think that maybe it would have been better off if both of us were dead, since we would now have to live in fear for the rest of our lives. Luckily, I haven't heard or seen anything, but you never know. These people always manage to find you. Let's hope they don't catch me now or for the rest of my life. My name is Amy. I am 29 and this is my story. My love for helping people came at a young age. I have always been very empathetical. I also was very mature for my age growing up. I was always the helpful one of the friend group and often would be the one people came to when they had any issues. This is what led me to become a 999 operator worker. I felt like being on the receiving end would allow me to use my empathy skills to really help people. I had been there for 4 years and loved every day. It was a highly stressful job and some of the calls often kept me up at night. But there's this one call I got. It is the reason I'm recording this. I need help. I can't talk to anyone personally about this, as they will think I'm some crazy woman who needs medicating. I promise you, I'm not crazy. It started about 3 months ago. It must have been some sort of record for how cold that January evening was. I was working the night shift, 7 p.m. until 3 a.m. This was a one-off, as I usually worked mornings to fit in line with my son, Harry, who is 14 and needs taking and picking up from school. I'm a single mother, widow, so fitting work around school is quite difficult, but luckily I have a super supportive manager. I'd been on nights only once before and had just signed up to work the next week to cover some of Elijah's work since she had left on her honeymoon. I didn't mind it. The extra money sure helped. I left Harry with my mom that week. She's been so helpful since my husband Dan died. Anyway, the first instance happened the first day of the week, long night shifts. Pretty normal night according to the regulars. Slow, and the calls weren't anything of major concern. Commonly your typical broken leg, stolen purse, those type of crimes. My phone rang. Hello, 999, ambulance, police or fire. I answered. No response. Hello, is anyone there? This was fairly common. Kids trying to pull pranks. But we are required to follow protocol and weren't allowed to hang up. Hello? Please help me. A voice of what seemed to be a young girl, perhaps 12 or 13. Hard to tell at this point. Yes, hello. How can I help you? Are you okay? I asked the girl. I don't know where I am. The man just left. He will be back soon. I grow concerned. Has this girl been kidnapped? Is she hurt? Tell me what happened. I can help you," I asked in a calm tone, worried on the inside.
"I was playing with my sister on the street. I live with my mom and dad in Euresham, just down the road from the village hall. A man, he drove up to us and asked what we were doing. Asked me where my mom and dad were. I told him they were inside cooking dinner for us. He got out of the van and asked us if he could play. Then
The girl stopped talking mid-sentence. I heard a faint door shut. It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. "Are you okay? Is someone there?" I asked her. The phone cut off. The phone went just seconds before I could trace the call. I ring the number back, but get the voicemail service. Getting worried, I go and find the night shift manager to report what just happened. I was told to keep trying the phone, but if it won't connect, then there is nothing I can do other than report it to the police. Which I did. I finished work at 3 a.m., drove home, and didn't sleep that night. Thinking about the call all night, I was so worried and kept thinking about that little girl. Thinking about her and her sister playing a game and then being taken. The next morning, I got out of bed, picked Harry up from my mom's, and told her what had happened. She was distraught too. I didn't let Harry hear, as this wasn't the type of news you'd want your son to hear. I took him to school and he kept asking about how my night was at work. I told him it was fine and said no more. I think he could tell I was worried from the hastiness in my voice. When I started work that night, I prayed that the little girl would call again, so I could help her. To my avail, my phone rang. It was her. I remembered the caller ID number. "Hello? Are you okay?"
"Hello? I rang yesterday. I need your help. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 14 and I've been taken from my home by a man I don't know. Please help me. I'm scared."
"Hold on, Emily. I'm tracing the call. I will get you help. I promise." I tried to reassure her I was going to get her home to her parents. Safely.
"He's back. I have to go. Help me. I'm begging you."
The phone cut off again. I'm starting to get more and more worried. I can't take much more of this. What if it were my son, Harry? The words, "I'm begging you," repeated over and over in my head. All I could hear was the pain in her voice. She sounds terribly scared. After the phone was disconnected, I managed to get the location of the call. It wasn't far. I patched myself through to the local police station and told them what had happened, but when they asked for the name of the victim, the officer on the phone went silent. "Emily Carter, you say? Are you sure?" The officer sounded confused. Why would he question that? Is there something I'm missing? Yes. Emily Carter, age 14, from Ersham, lives just down the road from the village hall, she says. Can you do anything with this information? I know it's not much, but she needs our help. Amy, is it? Emily Carter is an old case. Very old. She was kidnapped in her home from Ersham around 30 years ago. Police found the man who took her, but it was too late. Emily's body was recovered near the house she was held in for over 2 years. The officer awaited my response, but I was speechless. I physically couldn't talk. And that was my last day as an operator. I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. I spoke with Emily. Please believe me. I just need somebody to believe me. Hey Luce, Haven't talked to you in a while. Just checking to see how you're doing since Mark. Anyways, call or text when you feel like talking. I'm here for you." I stared at the phone, rereading the message my best friend sent. How am I doing? How do I answer that? Mark was my husband. Is my husband, I guess. 2 years ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. This started 18 months of total hell, pursuing treatment after treatment, making the smallest headway before it came crashing back on us again and again. We had discussed children, but had just never gotten around to it. That was the only silver lining in all of this. That I didn't also need to worry about caring for a child during this time. Eventually, we accepted that we needed to prepare for the very real fact that Mark was going to die. We made sure his will and life insurance were in order. He wrote letters to his parents and sister. I made sure I had all of his passwords so I could cancel any subscriptions he had. We hired a palliative nurse to take care of him at the house. 2 months after hiring the nurse, Mark passed away. The week following his passing is a blur. I know I met with the funeral director, but I couldn't tell you any details of what we discussed. I do remember being very grateful for my best friend, Kate, as she helped keep the director in line as to what Mark actually wanted, and didn't allow him to push me towards something more expensive. I remember going home after the funeral, walking in the door and seeing Mark's shoes in the entryway. That whole week, I had just been in a daze, occupying my mind with funeral arrangements. But now that it was over, seeing those shoes, I cried. No, I sobbed. Hyperventilating sobs. I cried for what felt like hours. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I felt a presence in the house. I thought maybe Kate or Mark's parents had come over to check on me. I walked downstairs towards the kitchen. I could hear someone moving around. It sounded like they were cooking. "Morning, baby. Sleep well?" "Mark?" I froze. How could this be? I had just buried him the day before. "You okay, baby? You look a little pale." I pinched myself. It hurt. This isn't a dream. "Mark, can you tell me what's been happening the last couple months?" "What are you talking about? I started a new job. You just got that promotion. Is everything okay?" Everything's fine." I left the kitchen in a daze. I thought that maybe this was one of those supernatural moments. That I maybe just got to have one more day with my love. And I intended to make the most of it. But the next day, he was there again. And the next day. And the next. It's been a month. And he's still here. I don't know how to handle this. I haven't told anyone. I haven't spoken to anyone. How do I tell people that my husband came back from the dead? How do I tell my husband he died a month ago?